Welcome to a new
Hello.
episode. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, welcome to a new episode in our series Astrology in the 21st Century. Today we welcome as a very special guest from Indianapolis in Indiana, right?
Yes.
Donna Woodwell.
Yes.
Greetings from Germany to Indianapolis. And we have prepared a special site for today's talk, which is this one. On our site astrotalk.vonabisw.de, there is the special site Talk with Donna Woodwell, and I prepared a little bit of material. I want to do this a little bit different than normally because Donna had some wonderful interviews, and the best one I found is this one with Vic Dicara. In this video, in, in In this video, Donna is talking with him about her biography and her shamanic practice. So I talked with Donna that today we will do some additional question and answers for things that were not mentioned in this video. So Donna, let me start with the question, where were you born?
You're gonna have to forgive my dog. She's taken this moment to express herself.
Yeah,
Um, I was born actually just outside of Washington, D.C., in a
okay.
town called Fairfax.
And you did go to high school in Washington, D.C.?
No, I went to a international boarding school in Canada.
Oh, that was the boarding school. Okay. And then you went to college. Which college did you go to?
First, I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then I went to Texas to
No,
go
let's
to.
stay with the Michigan part.
All
In
right.
that college in Michigan, you became a Christian and were educated by Jesuits. How did that come about?
I became a Catholic. Um, my family, uh, my family raised us Methodist, um, in a sort of generic suburban U.S. Methodist parish. Um, when I went to boarding school, I got a chance to experience lots of different religions. We spent some time fasting for Ramadan. I went to Jewish Seder suppers, and I had friends who were Catholic. So when I went to Michigan, I was studying Latin American studies, and exploring Catholicism made sense in the context of, my larger studies about uh, Latin America, you know, the movement of, indigenous and Catholic and the fusion of cultures. Um, it lasted about 3 years until when I moved to Texas, I was trying to figure out which mass at the local Catholic church I wanted to play in. And someone stole my guitar out of a locked cabinet in a locked room in a locked church. And I figured that was a sign that I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. So never went back again.
Okay. And when you were in Texas in the graduate school for journalism, I believe, is that right?
Journalism and Latin American studies. Yes. I went to
Yes,
school to be a foreign correspondent.
yes. And there you got sick because your body was reacting allergic to certain features in Texas or whatever. You will probably never know what really was the background of your really hard be getting ill. And then you met the alternative medicine, and through that you met the shamanistic lady, it was, right?
Yes.
And that shamanistic lady taught you shamanistic rituals in her tradition. Um, and getting to the astrological magic, did you already, when you were with that lady, and it took you a couple of years to do the sittings and the meditation and the invoking, did you already get in contact with planetary angels during that time when you did the training with shamanism by this lady?
Um, Actually, no. Um, when I was learning astrology, um,
That comes
it
later.
was
That comes later. So
no,
the
actually,
answer is no. You didn't invoke the planetary
no,
spirits or the
not
sign
not
angels,
that way.
or that came later. Okay. In the other video, there's a lot of information for how you got along and into astrology. Now, when you were studying astrology by the books of the bookstores, and for a couple of years you were by your own and studying all those books, did you start with psychological astrology, or did you jump right into traditional astrology?
I started with, well, what was in the bookstore? So,
That would be normally psychological astrology.
well, yeah, but I didn't, not in that sense. I think my first astrology books were, uh, how to calculate your own chart. So they weren't about anything. They were just sort of math.
Yes.
Um, some of the first books were probably Stephen Forrest because there were so many Stephen Forrest books
So
available.
you started with evolutionary
Probably
astrology.
evolutionary. Yeah.
Okay. Um, from Stephen Forrest, in the video, you mentioned that if you had nowadays somebody who wanted an evolutionary reading, you would refer him to people from Stephen Forrest, because you don't do that
Yeah,
nowadays.
I don't do that. No, I started with that. And then I started reading, what I could get my hands on, which is probably a little bit of everything. Um,
In what year are we when you do this book reading?
ooh, early 90s,
Early
maybe
90s. So
93,
that would be
94.
around when Project Hindsight started. Did
Yeah,
you
but I'd
ever?
never heard of it. I'd
Yeah.
never heard of it until I started my astrology business in 2003, and
Okay.
I built the astrological.
How old were you then?
Oh boy, 30,
So you
30-ish,
started
32,
astrology professionally when you were 30.
32. Yeah, about that.
Yeah. And it helped that you have been in business, normal business with suits, as you call it. So you
Mm,
had a lot of background of how to organize yourself and other people when doing business.
right.
So in 2003, your own astrological practice. What was that like in 2003? Have you there already been introduced to traditional books, or not yet?
No, because I had to found the Astrological Society in Austin, which was like 2005, maybe. Um, because in founding the Astrological Society of Austin, I went calling every astrologer that I could find in town. And it turned out that one of the first people to get an advanced degree in astrology in the United States is Maria Matus. And Maria lived 10 miles away. So she was talking about the school that what she was studying at Kepler College. And that whole crowd of people in those first classes at Kepler College, um, they had Rob Hand and they had
Dimitra
Joseph
George.
Crane and all the rest of them
And
were
Dimitra
there.
George was in that time teaching
Exactly.
Hellenistic astrology. So you got in contact with Kepler College, and by that you got in contact with traditional astrology.
Yes.
Did you attend Kepler courses yourself?
No, but I ended up teaching there.
Oh, nice career. Okay, in your video with this nice guy, I think he was from Japan, right?
Well, Vic's an American, but he lives in Japan, or at least
Oh,
he
okay.
did.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned that because you founded an astrological society in Austin, Texas, you got some people got the notice of you, and noted that you're there and that you're busy and that you're really good in what you're doing when founding that society. So they asked you to join them in their astrological association. I believe it was NCGR and ESA,
Yes.
right? Only those two.
Yes. Well, I did a lot of work for astrological organizations. I joined NCGR and I helped them convert their membership database into some modern technology to be able to
Yeah.
manage everybody.
Did you
Um,
get paid for that, or was it
no,
just
I was a board member.
pro bono? So you
Yeah,
were on the board of directors of NCGR and ESA. Which one
yes,
was the first? Was it first NCGR and then
yes,
ESA?
yes.
When you were on the board, who was with you on that board of the well-known people?
Mm. I'm not sure what you would count as well known.
Lee Lehman, for example.
No, she was before my time. Um,
Okay. It's not important. It's just
Yeah, I can't, I can't
it's not
remember. I
important.
mean,
How about Isa? Did you have been on the board of directors when Mary Merriman when Ray Merriman was on the board?
I was right between Ray Merriman had left and then he was coming back on when I resigned. So
Ah, okay.
Glenn Perry was there.
Yeah, I have
Um,
a video with Glenn Perry, a long video for the viewers.
um,
Okay, so
actually, I gave
that
my slot to Sam Reynolds so that he could be
okay.
on the board.
Okay,
So
that's good enough for the gaps I had in this video with your Japanese American guy. Now let's go back to our special site. Okay, now you are in the process of transforming to um, a traditional astrologer. When was it that you reinvented or when did you get again back to the shamanistic part of what you're doing today? There must have been a point in time in the video you mentioned that's not enough. Do you remember when that was?
oh,
When,
sure.
so,
Well, I had always had my private shamanic practice on the side, and astrology was kind of over there. So I had these two tracks running. And it wasn't until um, I founded the Astrological Society. Um, I was working with my Hermetic teacher. Uh,
wait. Where did that come? Where did your Hermetic teacher come around the corner? Where does he come
um,
from?
I
Is he a Hermetic initiate of the Golden Dawn, the Order of the Golden Dawn, or is he or she somebody else?
she is somebody else. She was from Australia, and she had her own lineage actually out of Germany. Maybe someday offline we'll talk about that. You can help me track down her lineage farther than I've been able to.
Okay.
Um, uh, and
So
her
what you're saying is there was a lady
Yes, in Australia.
well educated coming from Australia, but originally her tradition goes to Germany in
Yes.
Hermetic tradition.
Yes. So her teacher in Australia, Eddie Pilkey, was from Germany and he emigrated to Australia and then she was her teacher there. I met her online and we did a lot of work on, um, well, a lot of things that are very difficult to describe, but basically the essence of a Hermetic practice of learning how to open yourself up and finding self-mastery on various levels. Um,
So that begs the question if somebody was educated by a German guy. Since 1999, we have Professor Dr. Wouter Hanegraaff, um, who is from the University of Amsterdam. Did you ever hear the name Wouter Hanegraaff or about his work on Hermetic tradition? The chair he's on in universities, Hermetic philosophy and something like currents. I don't get the correct name. So, ever heard Wouter Hanegraaff or the Amsterdam University teaching people Hermetic philosophy and tradition?
I have not, but it looks like something that I definitely need to look up.
So the latest book is Hermetic Spirituality and the Historical Imagination. So that's interesting. So there is a tradition where you learned Hermetism, which gives me the question. Hermetic tradition has certain books. Um, there is the Asclepius. No, no, not the Asclepius. It's called. So there are certain books. Let's put it this way. There's a Corpus Hermeticum on the one side, and there was a certain book in the medieval times. Did you study books with that lady from?
No, absolutely not. Hers is a living tradition. And
Ah,
so,
okay.
uh,
So that's something very special. Okay, that's sufficient for what I wanted to know, how this Hermetic initiate came about. Um, so she taught you Hermetism in this experiential approach to experience things more than to study them, right?
yes, there were no books involved, none. So when
Can
people
you
ask, like, point to what you learned, I'm like, I can't.
Okay,
And
can you give us an example what one of this ritual was? What did you do? Did you evoke planetary spirits or astrological spirits or anything
oh
like
no,
that?
we didn't do any astrology.
Okay.
Um, Her teacher was actually a metallurgist, so he was closer to the alchemy tradition.
Okay.
But what we spent a lot of time talking about was, I mean, how does the human psyche work? And
Okay.
how do we think? How do we expand our consciousness beyond, you know, our normal state of mind?
Okay.
And it's actually taken me years to process what I learned in some very powerful vignettes that we had together.
Hmm.
Um, Now I would say something like, the process of enlightenment simply means continuing to get beyond your own reality bubble, so to speak. Everything we think, everything we feel is created by our philosophy of life, our I call it reality bubble. It's faster than, you using a word like fancy psychological terms.
Okay.
Um, and
So
that
when
that
was that? When was that training taking place? What year are we
that
now?
was taking place about the time I was founding the Astrological Society. So
2005, something like that.
2000, no, it was before I had my child. My child was born in 2004. So I'm going to say like 2002, 2003, somewhere in there.
Okay. Now you mentioned in the video, and you mentioned now that you have a child, one
Mhm.
child or more than one.
Just one. She's
Uh,
she's good.
and the father of the child is not the dead boyfriend, I suppose.
I know I divorced my husband, my ex-husband, a long time ago.
But you in the video you mentioned a dead boyfriend.
Oh yeah.
When was that?
That was from uh, the one I was dating in boarding school.
Oh, that's long ago. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
long ago.
So in 2003 or something, when did you meet your husband, which you are now divorced from?
Oh, 2000, 1992,
Oh, that's a long time. Till 2003, there was the child. And when did get the divorce?
2010.
Oh, okay. That was a lot of gap in the other video. Okay, now we are clear about that. Okay, when your husband was your husband and you were doing on two tracks and nobody knew about what you were doing. On the one side, you were doing shamanistic practice. On the other side, you were a businesswoman with suits and all that. Um, how about your husband? How did he react to your shamanistic part?
That's an interesting question. He did a lot of martial arts.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
he was an engineer, so he thought like an engineer, like it's science. But he did a lot of martial arts, and martial arts, when you have, a black belt, uh, gets involved with a lot of energy work because you can't help it. It's just how it works. And so for him, he actually ended up spending more time with my teacher. And even though he didn't learn shamanism, he had a lot of energy work done with her. So, eh, eh, I wouldn't say he despised all of it, but he kept a healthy skepticism. And but I don't say he came to probably appreciate that there was more there than he also grew up with in his own philosophy.
And you were divorced when?
2010.
So there are 7 years before you have become professional in 2003, founded the Astrological Society in Austin, Texas, 2005. How did he react to your astrological side? That's something additional, a lot of not very scientific again, but he obviously was okay with your shamanistic energy work. How did he react to your astrological work?
Um,
And you becoming a professional in that disgusting field.
I don't think he minded that so much as that I wasn't going back to work outside the house with a real job. So I
Okay.
think that was I think that was part of the divorce that we ended up getting, was
Oh,
that
he
I
wanted
wasn't
you. He
making quite
wanted
as
you
much.
to
He
earn that
wanted to
much.
make it.
You have.
Um,
You had. You. I suppose you had a very pretty decent salary in the professional
yeah, he
world,
did.
and you
And
were earned.
I had a kid at home, like a little one. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So okay. Now that's enough for the gaps in the videos. So now we are clear about your hermetic background, but we are still not clear how you found astrological magic. I can see how you came into the traditional astrology via Kepler College, but Kepler College is not in those days a training facility for magic, right?
Right.
How did you get infected by the magic?
Well, okay, let's say I was already doing magic. So the magic wasn't the issue. It was the putting astrology into the magic.
Yes, yes.
I like two or three things had to happen simultaneously, which was I already had this magical background. Um, I was in training with a Hermetic teacher who basically told me, Donna, you're not going to find what you're looking for in the Western tradition until you go back at least a couple thousand years, because I was looking for the shamanic roots of a Western practice. And that truly does mean going back to, like, you know, the Chaldean oracles is probably a place where you see the last vestiges of the original Greek shamanic tradition. Maybe Paracelsus and those, not Paracelsus, Empedocles and the other one who was, no, I'll come up with this. I'm so sick, it's hard for me to remember
No,
some of these.
no
Around the
problem.
time of Empedocles, there was a shamanic tradition underlying their work. If you read, um, and there's been, books on those subjects. So the concept that I had to go back really far in the Greek tradition.
Well, wait a minute. How did you do that? You can read books or you can get a teacher. What did you do?
Well, in this case, I read the Chaldean oracles. In fact,
Okay.
Maria suggested that I read the Chaldean oracles because I started talking, and she's
So
like,
you
"You read?"
didn't
I'm
get
like,
into the academic research on the same subject, because we have academic researchers like
"Mm-mm.
Professor Washberg, who did a lot of work about the Mesopotamian astrological background, and we have a lot of
No,
Egyptologists.
I didn't even know to look for any of that stuff.
Oh,
No,
okay,
between Maria and my Hermetic teacher Leonora, basically I was like, here, read the Chaldean oracles. And so
oh,
I
okay,
picked up a copy and I was like, oh my God, now this is what I've been looking for.
okay,
Um,
okay.
and so then I started realizing that there was much more of a connection between my shamanic studies and astrological studies, and that if I were looking at astrology from the indigenous point of view, what would I think of these planets? And I'm like, I would think of them as living spirits. If I'm thinking of them as living spirits, why can't I talk to them using all of the shamanic techniques that I've already learned? And so these things kind of all crystallized in my head. And I'm like, okay, now I understand what's supposed to happen. So I had to start looking for things. I had a better sense of what to look for. And then I could pick up copies of things like the Heptameron and say, oh, wait, yes, they're invoking spirits and they're doing it in Latin. So all of these things, once I understood the way to approach the question, all of these pieces that resonated, I mean, all the way down to Marsilio Ficino was basically invoking planets in a shamanic way,
Mhm.
just doing it in a hermetic context, which is, I mean, hermetic in the loosely applied sense of working in the sound realm of of Neoplatonic philosophy.
Now that makes it interesting, because one would think that somebody like you, finding all that material, and here is how you see the shamanic astrological background, um, and your philosophy, the astrology as a priest or priestess in the temple of astrology. And here is your homepage. The viewers can go to your homepage and look it up, what you can find there. And then we have found out that you were not trained by somebody from the Order of the Golden Dawn.
No,
And
I'm fairly confident if you look back into the history of the Golden Dawn, uh, they were corresponding with people in Germany
that's a
before they set
legend.
up.
That's
Yeah,
probably never took place. That's just a legend in the
I
history.
know, but my teacher is from Germany,
Yeah.
and he had a family history of
Okay.
working in the Hermetic tradition. And so it makes me wonder, like, what was happening in Germany in the Hermetic tradition in the mid 1800s,
Okay.
because it's theoretically possible, because, anybody who does these things tends to talk to each other eventually if they can find one
Yeah,
another.
I agree on
Uh,
that.
it may not be as far-fetched
Yeah, the
as,
problem is probably that this tradition in Germany might have existed. The problem here is that the Golden Dawn claimed to have contact with Mademoiselle Sprengel or Spengel, but that historical research found out that that was probably not the case. So we have you are an interesting case because you come out of somebody who has a direct link to German tradition, which might not have to do anything with the Golden Dawn, but has his own tradition. And the problem here would be, what tradition was that? Was it a Rosicrucian tradition? Was it Lodge in Germany in the 1900s, and especially in the beginning 20th century? There was a lot of tradition going into Hermetism, and the founding of the OTO was done in the end of the 19th century in Germany, and so on and so forth. Kellner was there, and Franz Hartmann was there. So there were a lot of German offerings in doing things. But we don't want to discuss this tradition today, because for me that's good enough to know about your Hermetic tradition. What I don't know is, when you go into this shamanistic astrology like you did, and you got your experience, what timeline are we now? In what year did you really do the first invocation?
oh boy. All right. So got divorced in 2010.
Okay,
Um,
let's take
so I'm gonna
let's
say it's
take.
about 2000. I'm gonna think it's about 2013.
Okay, that's good enough. Now, when you did that, there was a lot material available for the term magic and astrological magic, and vice versa. You didn't use any books of that tradition. Did I get this impression right?
Yeah, I had my own, and I was
So,
trying
so
to,
you
I
didn't
was,
you didn't read the Picatrix.
oh, I read the Picatrix. Yes.
Oh, you did. In what in
I
what
read the
in
Picatrix.
in what language did you read the Picatrix?
I read the Green translation.
That's the English one.
Yeah.
That's later. That's not 2013, right?
I don't know. It came out in 2015, maybe.
Something like that. Okay. Basically, you read the Picatrix. Now, when you are reading the Picatrix, your jaw must have dropped.
Oh, I thought it was great. What was even funnier is that I was reading the translation when I was on a plane flying across the country. And I was reading about uh, Venusian love charms, and I think it has something to do with planting talismans in the corners of your house in order to attract someone, a lover or something. And I was like, would I actually do that? Would I go so far as to plant things, or would I just amend it to my own way? And as I read that, as I thought that, uh, the flight attendant tapped me on the shoulder. And I said, and I looked up and I was like, huh? She says, a gentleman behind you gave me this to give to you. And I looked at the card and my eyes got really big, because it was the business card of someone that I had dated in college. And I turned around and there he was, like 3 aisles back, waving at me. And I was like, okay, this is so weird, because here I am about reading about Venusian talismans attracting lovers. And on a plane at 35,000 feet above the United States somewhere, there is my ex-boyfriend right behind me. So I took that as a message of, oh, you should probably pay attention to what's going on here, because this is
Okay.
some powerful stuff.
Okay. So what did the Picatrix then became? Do you now practice according to the rules in the Picatrix?
No, I am not that. I am not that a formal of an astrological magic practitioner.
Okay.
I mean, I'm more of the, I understand the basic principles of the planets. The planets are my friends. I talk to them, and we make up our own rituals based on that, and using astrology for timing. So
Okay.
while I appreciate the people who created the Epicatrix and the Heptameron and all kinds of things, I'm still a modern girl, and I don't. I
Well,
In my book,
that's
in my
probably
book,
healthy. That's probably healthy because if you follow the Picatrix for a certain ritual, you have to kill a chicken with
yeah,
a
that's not
bone
happening.
with a bone and not with a knife. So that
Yeah,
might
that's
be
not
tricky.
happening. So, I mean, I figure Mercury's the god of transportation and flight and communication, and he's going to be perfectly happy with roller skates to represent mercurial interests or as an anchor for his creativity. But they didn't have roller skates back in the Greek world. They didn't
Yeah.
have
Okay.
roller skates.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you couldn't have used them. So, like, I think magic needs to continually evolve to take into account where we are. And I
Okay.
know that there are some traditionalists who would absolutely disagree with me for that. But then I'm not a traditionalist, and in the sense I'm a traditionalist in the sense that I
Yes. Yes.
believe in connecting to the originating essence of
Okay.
things.
So let's do some context. In 1962, the Brill publisher in Leiden published a project which was long in the working. It was started in the 1920s. It was done by Professor Ritter and Plessner. And this book of 1962 for for people who can read German, is available on the internet. And it was a project of the London Warburg Institute. Abe Warburg was the founder of that institute. And here we have the names. Oh, this PDF is really tricky to show. Let me see. This is the title, Picatrix, Das Ziel des Weisen von Pseudo-Magritte. It's in English, Picatrix, the aim of the sage of the pseudo-Magritte, German version. And it was translated by Professor Helmut Ritter and Martin Plessner. So for people who watch this video and can read German, this is for free. It's as a book available for people who can read German in this edition. And then there is the English edition, the Picatrix, translated by John Michael Greer and Christopher Warnock. And it looks like this. This is the Picatrix 1 and 2. So you can find the English on Amazon. And now, next question for the context, 2015 and around. Dorian Greenbaum was getting her PhD on the diamond in Hellenistic astrology.
Mhm.
Did that ever interest you, this book?
Um, yes, and I never got around to reading it, but not for lack of trying. My life has been a little complicated in the last 10 years since I've been a
Okay.
single mom
No,
running a business.
that's okay. Next question. Jamblichus. Did you ever study Jamblichus?
Iamblichus, yes.
So you are nowadays even starting out as an autodidactic lady who invokes planetary spirits without the knowledge of the literature in that field. You're nowadays well versed in the literature, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, Iamblichus was on my list of things. I read George Shaw's book when
Yeah.
back
Okay.
when I was collecting things, but there was that moment back in 2005 or so where it was like, boom, oh, wait, I get it. I finally get it. And then
Yes.
from that point, everything else has just been
Yeah.
pieces that fill in a, a, a philosophical worldview that my shamanic teacher and my hermetic teacher had already set up. So it's like
Yes.
those
Yeah.
streams fused and
How do you
I was,
explain that your teachers didn't know these literature books?
oh, neither one of them studied.
Ah.
Both of them had experiential traditions. There were
Okay.
no books involved.
Okay.
I was the one with the books
Okay.
and trying to figure out how in the world I can have this powerful
Yes.
lived experience where
Yes.
we sit in circle and we can see what each other sees. We can experience all of these colors. We can have visitations by spirits. How can I
Yes.
have that? This powerfully moving world and these books over here
Yes. Yes.
that don't connect to that. And
Okay.
that just didn't work for me. So it took years for
So
them to see that.
nowadays you have an advantage over the book learned magicians because you came from the practical side, which is much better than starting from the theoretical side. Would you agree?
I would say it's probably harder to, I think I took the easier path in the sense that once you have practical experience, finding the words is usually a simpler thing than to have been stuck with a bunch of theory and have no way
Yes,
to
yes, I
move
would
it
agree. Yeah,
into more
yeah,
experiential
yeah.
levels.
Okay. Another context of yourself is the astrology hub. Could you tell our viewers what the astrology hub is and why you are involved with them?
Well, I was involved with them. So I left about 4 years ago. So in context, I think I joined them around 2015, 2016,
Yeah,
15.
somewhere around that. Yeah.
I they approached me when they were first getting started. I had actually gotten I gotten fired from working for my sign because they wanted someone who was more willing to write more daily horoscopes than I wanted to write because I was writing daily horoscopes at that point in time. And within a day of getting fired, Astrology Hub came in and approached a friend of mine who then called me to say, hey, they want to set up a new astrology online um, collection of teachers and a membership program to work with various astrologers, basically an online teaching platform.
So
Um,
basically, it was a competition for Chris Brennan and a nightlife astrology, right?
no, they didn't see themselves as competition to really anything at that point,
Oh, okay.
because there was no one doing anything like that. They weren't a
Okay.
school. They were um, the founder, Amanda, who I absolutely adore, um, she had a background in um, internet marketing, and she had had a reading uh, with an astrologer, loved the experience so much, wanted to she wanted to share her love with as many people as she could. And the reason she had me working with her is because I knew all the astrologers. I'd been on the board of NCGR, the board of ESAR. I worked with all the other organizations in various practices. And so I helped them make introductions to lots of other astrologers so that they could be on telesummits, uh, give presentations in um, give presentations in their membership programs and those kinds of things. So I was basically serving as an astrological advisor for the first maybe 4 years. I also helped Amanda co-host
Did
her
did did
podcast.
did, did they pay you or was it pro
Oh
bono?
yes, no, they paid me.
Ah,
No,
okay. So
after I
this
left
is
ESAR.
this is the difference to the organizations. There you
Oh yeah,
work
no,
pro
no, yeah.
bono.
After ESAR, I'm like, I'm not doing this stuff for free anymore.
Okay,
So,
I understand. So Astrology Hub is sort of your contractor. You had a contract of what you should do, and they paid you for that.
yes, I mean, I got paid by Kepler. I got paid by astrology.com. I got paid by my sign. I got paid by Astrology Zone. I got paid by Astrology Hub. So I worked for a lot of different places in the
Okay,
astrological
okay. So
community.
that explains that. Now we come back to the planetary angels. The focus of our talk today might not be a long focus because we have so much to talk about before that. So how about the book by Benjamin Dykes? I have it here. It's this one. You might have it on your shelf. Let me see. It looks like this. Do you have this book?
I do now.
Oh, recently. Okay.
Well, I mean, I got it at some point in time, but I didn't have it when I was talking about planetary angels.
Yes. And how about your impression? How do you like the book?
I love Ben Dykes. He's awesome.
Now, this specific book.
It's been a while since I've read it. I couldn't tell you what's in it.
Oh, okay. Very good. Now, context this one. Is my impression right? It's called 100 Days of Magic, and you came up till the 50th, and then it was closed?
It was closed because my assistant told me to stop broadcasting on Facebook and to start putting it on YouTube. And so my job for the year is to build out my YouTube channel. So I'm experimenting with different formats. So
Okay. So you only have 50 or do you have 100 videos?
I've only done 50 so far. I will finish it eventually, but it may not be in the same format.
So my impression was right, you have 50 and then there's a break, and someday in the future you will continue
Someday in the
to
future. Well, I ended up, my whole life stopped in 2003 because I ended up packing up my whole house and moving across the country. And that's kind of been my focus for the last,
Yes,
you
okay.
know.
How about this one? What's the background of the Dead Astrologer Society?
I have more episodes of that I have to put up too. That was is that my first podcast? I think that's my
And
podcast.
it's an
Those are
early
old.
podcast, which is you reintroduced it in YouTube, but it's an older thing, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. It was on Paramedia Radio. Again, I think it's probably 2000. Did I put the dates on there? 2014, 2015? Somewhere
No,
in there?
the dates you get on YouTube is 2023, 2023 or something like that.
No, but there would have been an original air date that's listed in the description of each one of them.
I didn't find
Yeah.
out that.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
probably 2014-ish.
and
Um,
what was the idea behind this
there's a
series?
movie. There's a movie that came out a long time ago with Robin Williams called The Dead Poets Society.
I know, I saw it. Yeah.
And so I named it the Dead Astrologer Society because I was making a riff on the Dead Poets Society and because I wanted to talk to people about, the differing roots, the roots causes of astrology, how they used to think about it. And
Okay.
it was just fun.
Okay. How about this one? Magic and Mastery podcast.
That is my current podcast that also is on hiatus because I moved. We'll get all these things back on in the next few months.
Okay. What's the background of this podcast?
Magic and
What do you want to do here?
That's an excellent question. I mean, my magic school is called the School of Magic and Mastery. When the podcast is reinvigorated, I will have a sequence of book reviews, interviews with authors, and interviews with other magical practitioners.
Okay.
And you will see that sometime in the next few months.
Will it be on YouTube or will it be on an alternative platform?
It will be on YouTube/podcast. So I'm actually going, I mean, if you really care, I'll be in Riverside and that'll broadcast at both places.
Okay. Okay. Good. So next question. You had a short video with this American Japanese guy about the nakshatras, which is called moon houses in the Western tradition. Do you practice moon houses in your counseling practice?
Lunar mansions?
Yes.
Sometimes. I mean, that's more of a personal thing.
Can you tell our viewers what this is, lunar mansions?
What the lunar mansions are? Okay. We are used to the solar zodiac. The 12 signs of the zodiac are based on the sun's seasonal apparent motion across the ecliptic. And that's where the 12 zodiac signs get. That's why we have 12 months in a year. However, one could make the argument that the lunar zodiac, where the moon is based on its passage across the ecliptic in a month, the lunar year, divided up into 28 or 29, depending on whether you're rounding up or down for the passage from that sidereal motion across the background of stars, is actually an older zodiac than the solar one, because you can see it every night. And so that lunar zodiac is the basis. There's an equivalent in Chinese astrology, there's an equivalent in Vedic astrology, and there was an equivalent in Western astrology, probably before it even became recaptured in its Greek formulation. So that movement of the moon across the sky has always been associated with what is considered an auspicious use of time. So if the moon is in a certain mansion, it's the auspicious time to cut your hair. It's the auspicious time to start a relationship. It's an auspicious time to break up a relationship. It's an auspicious time to buy or sell or whatever.
You need literature to do that, which tells you this lunar mansion is for that. What literature did you use?
I got on the internet and with JSTOR, which is the collection of scholarly articles, and I downloaded every article I could possibly find on lunar mansions. And then, so, I mean, there's a lot of scholarship, especially on lunar mansions and how they were used in various African cultures. You put that with all the other things and you recognize that, again, basic principles, what does this moon represent?
So what lunar mansion are we in today?
Oh, I told you I've been sick. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if the planets are in the sky. I barely know the sun is up.
So basically you have, do you have a software program who gives you the information about lunar mansions, or do you have to look it up?
Yeah, there's an app for that. There's several apps for that. You can just look them up on your phone if you want to. The question is that there's actually two sets of lunar mansions in the West because around 900, what year is it? So around 1100 years ago, the astrologers were trying to figure out the Western astrologers were trying to figure out what to do with the lunar mansions. And they decided that because the sun was more important, that they would move the Western concept of lunar mansions to realign them with the solar zodiac. So they're no longer aligned with the stars. They're aligned with the solar zodiac in the West, which interestingly is the exact opposite thing that the Indian astrologers did. The Indian astrologers had the lunar mansions, and then Greek astrology came in, and they decided to realign the solar zodiac with the lunar zodiac, which is why the Indians ended up with a sidereal zodiac. So we gave different preference to both of them depending on our philosophy of culture. That the Indian astrology is lunar centric, the Western astrology is solar centric. So theoretically, you'd have two sets of lunar mansions. Usually in the West, they use the zodiac based one, the solar zodiac based one. I read everything I could find. That includes Christopher Warnock's book. I love Christopher Warnock, by the way. People should always read Christopher Warnock stuff.
But
the thing I found hardest about the lunar mansions for me personally to deal with was that all of these Arabic names were foreign and I was probably mispronouncing them. So I sat down with like all of the descriptions that I could find of each of the mansions, what they meant. And based on that, I just free associated until I could get an image that at least reflected those things so I could remember what it was. So
that's good enough for this topic. This is your book. Why did you write it and why is it so short?
I had nothing to do with it. Simon & Schuster came to me and they said, would you write an astrology dictionary? And I said, sure, why not? That sounds fun. So they commissioned the whole thing and I just wrote it for them.
Now for the context, I have AstroTalk playlist Magic and Mysticism for the viewers who want to dig deeper. And the first video is with Chris Brennan and his colleague Kopok, Astrology and Magic, and a lot of other videos if you want to look at that. Now, spirituality and magic. In Monomoria, Decans terms, bounds, and Dodecatemoria, how do you treat these categories spirituality? Do you use them in a spiritual way?
I don't spend, there is a formal traditional astrology community. There's a loosely defined magic community in astrology. People talk to each other. I don't hang out with them. So, Austin Coppock has written some great stuff. I highly recommend it if you can find a copy. But I don't bother with using the decans and things on a. I mean, yes, I'm aware in when you're looking at planetary angels, which I thought was totally fascinating, that you can go down the Agrippa path and you can like find the 72 angels, which is like 2 angels per decan, and do the math and find the appropriate time when you're making a talisman to get the exact right list of names for that. Would I go that far? No, because I'm not that much of a traditionalist. It's just faster to just go out there and say, hey, Jupiter, come and help with this. So if you were looking at someone to do that really intellectual way of doing that work, I know about it. I have read about them, but do I use them in my own practice? No.
Nothing
Because
of all these terms, no monomoria delineation, no term delineation, and no dodecatemoria delineation? You don't do that. Okay, good.
I don't, it's not that they can't work. It's just, that's not the way I think about my practice. I am far less, I'm far more interested in what it feels like to hang out with Venus than I is about calculating when Venus is really strong.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
because
Next question. Dr. Robert Hand on the United Astrology Congress in 1986 mentioned astrology is applied mysticism. Would you concur with that?
Rob Hand is fascinating, and he's been getting more and more interested in his spiritual practices as he's gotten into his astrology. I think maybe it was his wife, correct me if I'm wrong, who got involved in some spiritualist movements where they were channeling spirits. And I think he's also realizing there's a lot more than just translating things,
Okay.
which I think is so awesome. I think I heard him at Norwalk once, and he was talking about, I don't remember what it was. And I was like, yes, that's astrology's problem. For the intellectual side of astrology, to me, they're like in flatland. They're like in flatland in this two-dimensional world of charts, and they don't realize there's this whole rich experiential presence behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you've spent some time actually really communing with the planets and sitting outside with a group of people when you can see Venus and doing a shamanic ceremony to invoke Venus when she's hanging out right there, it's a really powerful internal experience. And then to go back and find, like you have to do it like with math. You have to look up all these things on tables in order to get the right thing. It's like, why would I want to do that when I can get the real experience right there? So I understand. I understand why the medieval tradition has relied on the magic of doing numbers. But when I started studying Kabbalah, one of the things they talked about was you can Lon Milo Duquette did a book called Chicken Kabbalah. And he said, there's a stream in Kabbalah that believes that if you are running and working with numbers and gematria and like this word equals this numbers or could be this number and the symbolism that goes through those weird set of what appears to be over intellectual combinations, you can like bore your brain or confuse it so much that you have a kind of spiritual breakthrough into a place of clarity after that. And I always think of all the arcane calculations that are done in some of the really, really traditional magic by numbers, so to speak, magic by astrology numbers can also get your intellectual mind so full that it's finally chasing its own tail and gets out of the way to the actual work that you have to do, which is connecting to something that's far deeper than words.
That sounds like my next quote. Astrology as the ritual to experience the numinosum, the unknowable archetypes, the children of nous, and attempt to come into cautious contact with the self. That sounds like what you just said, isn't it?
I think that's close. Sure.
Yeah, okay. I
mean,
there's a German quote from Novalis. Fate and soul are two terms for the same principle. This is from Liz Green in her book Fate and Astrology in the German translation, which you can buy here. What about your opinion that soul and fate are two different terms for the same principle? Would you agree?
I think that our soul, when I think about astrology, I think in very Platonic terms that when you look at the myth of and you think of how we get here, there's the all one where everything merges together down through the various,
Yes.
what New Age people call dimensions, down here to physicality.
Yes.
That Plato's image of a spinning wheel, of the planets moving around an axis and spinning us into manifestation, that the planets metaphorically are like creating the seeds. So when we look at our chart, it's the stuff around which our physical experience constellates. Just like if there's a pond outside my house and it's frozen solid. And so I think about how things freeze. And I know that scientifically it's because there's various instabilities in the water. It's not like the water freezes from left to right or one side to the other. It freezes like from these little nuggets, these little seed points of disturbances out from those points. And I think of an astrology chart as like that, the little seeds from which our whole personality freezes out of, precipitates from. And so in that sense, our chart is a reflection of the soul's intended experience in this particular incarnation. And it's going to attract to it all the things that it needs to explore whatever questions it wants to explore. And it's going to constantly pull us closer to what that is. And from that pulling into the future, I think you could think of that as fate. Because we're constantly going to try to get closer to what we're meant to be. I have a very, very strong Mercury and a secondary strong Saturn. A Jupiter in my chart. But I have a strong Mercury. So what did I do? I went to school to be a foreign correspondent. When it realized that wasn't going to work, I took on my writing and I became interested in philanthropy. And then on the side, I was doing shamanism and astrology. Those are all mercurial things. And even from someone on the outside who doesn't know about astrology, that might seem totally different. But from an internal perspective, from an astrological perspective, I'm still being driven by the way my chart is wired, whether I like it or not. And hey, sure, you can call that fate.
Okay. The Reverend Jangle Bones is Australian, and he has new prayers to the 7 planets.
Yay! I was wondering if someone would ever do that.
He did new prayers, and you can buy them for $5, I believe. This is close to what we are talking in a couple of seconds. The prayers to the planets by the Sabians of Haran are equal to the prayers to the planets in the Picatrix. That was a research result of this project with the Picatrix in a German translation. And here is a group of Nettesheim. Do you have his book?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's in English and in German available. I have a film list. People can click on this film list and they get some information about the Picatrix. And then I have a film list, Astrological Magic, and people can go there and spend their time there with 66 videos. And there is a film list, Gods and Demons and Magic, and there we have another 37 videos. So there's a lot of information available in the internet. There is this grimoire information. There's a lot of German videos there. And then we have the Hermetism film list, which is another 105 or 106 videos. So the people watching this video can take this video as a starting point. And then we have the last on Nativities and Guardian Daimones, Jamblichus, and the Guardian Angel. And we talked about the Hermetic Spirituality, the book of Wouter Hanegraaff. And now we are coming to the last quote before we go to the invocation texts of Donna. Thesis: Astrology as the teaching of primordial principles, not of the stars or planets. Therefore, the planets can never be causes, only signs as representative for one of the 7 primordial principles, now 10, as above, so below. The horoscope as the teaching and learning plan for the life of the individual. Lord, not my will, but your will be done. Would you agree with that quote?
Sure. I wouldn't put it so complicated, but yes.
Okay, good.
I
Now,
think
Now let's get back to what the reason for our talk today really was, because I found you on the internet because you have a special site information, which is the Planetary Angels. And the first link is this one. These are the texts relevant, and then there is another link which might be this one, the starting point probably. Yes, introducing the planetary angels. Now, that was the reason why we got together today. Now I want to hear from you. What's all about these texts in your homepage? What are you talking about when you are introducing the planetary angels, and where do you get the ideas from? Did you get the ideas because the angels came to you and whispered into your ear, as they sometimes do with me, because they whispered to me in 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to start a certain homepage, and I took down the hour and then did it. How about you? Do the angels come and whisper to you, or is there a different approach in your life?
Sure. I mean, I don't differentiate between, Jupiter and Zedekiel, but sure. Um, you know, the first thing I taught about tuning into planets was at Kepler College. And I think it was maybe 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. And I called it Planets in Pajamas because I like they would come and talk to you in the middle of the night. So I figured they had pajamas on. So it was like a fun experiential kind of astrology and thinking about planets in terms of, the seven forces and what constellates with them. So in this process, I remembered a graduate course that I took at Texas with an anthropology professor that basically said ideas do not come from nowhere. They're always in existence already and changing names. And so that begs the question of, we had planets as gods for a long time in Western culture. They didn't just disappear. We can't have something so powerful that we name the days of the week after them, and we had temples to them. What happened? You just didn't make them go away. And it finally occurred to me that that the Greek word for angel is messenger, and the planets were fulfilling the role of messengers of the divine. So when they became angels, doesn't it make sense? Like, I wonder if there is a relationship between the planets and what the early Catholic Church called angels. And so I started exploring the question. And then I realized that clearly I had not been the only one to get here, because Pseudo Dionysus had his own angels. And once I looked in the right way, that Agrippa had angels and the Heptameron had angels. And not only was it something that these ancient astrologers, these medieval astrologers were talking about, they were arguing about it, like which angel belonged to which thing. And so what I did was took all that information and tried to make sense of it for myself. And I learned really fun things along the way that changed my overall interpretation of how to think about planets. Like Jupiter, again, is a great example. Zedek is the Hebrew term for Jupiter, and Zedek translates as justice. That's where we get a whole collection of angel names. I mean, angel names just have EIL or L attached to the end of them to say they are of God. So Zedek El, or Zadkiel, became the archangel for Jupiter. And it had to do with, finding justice or attracting abundance. And so the Middle-aged folks had, by the time we got to the Middle Ages, there was a whole collection of angels that were invoked in the same way the planets had used to be invoked, but they were more acceptable to various church-going people, which is part of the ways in which astrology found a way to survive, even when some of its tenets were maybe not quite as popular in an institutional church. So I put all this together just to help me clarify my own stuff. If you really want to do a thing on planetary angels, I put that stuff out there, and I was contacted by a scholar in Czechoslovakia. He's like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I thought I was the only one." But he had put together this huge book. It's like 800 or 900 pages of research on the angels, but I think it's in, I think there's a summary version that's in English, but I think the rest of it is in Czech. So I'm not sure he ever actually translated the whole thing.
Okay.
But he came up to pretty much the same conclusions I did, um, to just figure out what are the best angel names to use. What does each one represent? How have they been represented in history? And I just put as much, I mean, this was quick research for me. I didn't have time to really dive into all the stuff that I wanted to look up because again, I run a school. I am not a scholar funded by a university to be able to do these things. So
Okay.
I find as much as I want in order to understand the basic principles, and then I generally move on to something else.
And how about using that information in your daily shamanistic practice? Do you invoke those angels?
Sure, because they're the same as the planets to me.
Okay.
So for me, the difference between calling on Jupiter and calling on Zedekiel is just what they happen to call themselves when they show up.
Okay, you said that you are not following the rules of the Picatrix, which is rather sophisticated and complicated, and you have to do a lot of things to invoke
Oh, yeah, they do.
any spirit. You don't do these things. What do you do? How do you get in contact with Mercury?
Well, I can keep it super simple and just say, "Hey, it's Wednesday," or for me, having been an astrologer for years, having studied the sky, having done all the work where I watch, different planets moving across my angles, different planets moving across the sky. I know how they feel to me. I even spent some time doing Vedic astrology mantras for each one of the planets.
Okay.
And so I mean, when you do a mantra like 108 times a day for months, I mean, you really get a deep dive into what a planet feels like for you. And
Okay.
so, sure, if I'm feeling it, I might invoke Mercury by building a Mercury altar and putting Mercury's favorite things on it and waiting till the Mercury hour or when Mercury's in a particularly strong position
You
in the
mean the
sky.
planet, you mean the planetary hour?
Yeah, the planetary hour.
Okay.
Or when Mercury's in Gemini, or when it's crossing the midheaven. I might wait for one of those moments. Or I might just sit down and go, I know what Mercury is because Mercury is me. It's in me. All the planets are in each one of us. And since I've done so much work on them, I just say, "Hey, Mercury, come hang out with me."
Do you do
And
do you do this aloud? Do you speak out, "Hey Mercury," or do you just think it when you are alone?
both, depending on the situation.
Oh, okay.
I tend to be more out loud when I'm more stressed, honestly.
Okay.
If I'm stressed and frustrated, I tend to get louder than when I'm just by myself.
Okay.
So
Uh,
sometimes, and I also learned channeling with a journal, and sometimes I just take a piece of paper out and start writing. And it's
okay.
journaling slash automatic writing. I start to end up having a conversation with the Mercury in me, and we take both parts of the conversation.
Do you start your day with invoking the day planet?
I
Sunday would be the sun. Monday would be the moon. Do you when you wake up on a Monday morning, do you invoke the moon?
I have done that in the past. It's a practice that comes in and out of my life. Right now, I'm keeping a daily journal, and I always open it up with, "All right, who wants to talk to me today?" And sometimes it's the spirit of the day, and sometimes it's something else.
Okay.
So I'm not as formal about it as I used to be, but I'm a big believer that people need to go through the formal periods just so that they can understand how these things feel. And then once you learn the rules, feel free to, move beyond them.
Now you have these seven archangels. Now, in the tradition, in the hierarchy of the tradition of Dionysius Areopagitas, the archangels are the second step. The lowest is the angels, and then come the archangels, and then the archai, and then the other six hierarchies up to the seraphim. I have a feeling that is not your view of the importance of the archangels. Is that correct?
Um,
For you, it seems to me that your relationship to the archangels is that you take them much more serious on a hierarchy, on the level of the hierarchy, which they are normally placed. I think you place them more on a higher ladder. Is that correct?
I think of them as planets. I think of them on the level as planets and they're
Yeah.
both
And
they're both
they would be on a very much higher level then, because the planets in the Dionysius Areopagita treatise is higher than the second level.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm always impressed by the number of hierarchical systems that humans can come up with.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
You can
Before
also
we
you can
go
also
to your homepage, I wanted to clear up the copyright of this video. I have the right to publish this video uncut and unedited.
feel
And
free.
Donna has the right to do with it what she wants. So you are free to do anything you want to do with this for any purposes. But I only have the right to do uncut and unedited, and that's very important for myself, for my well-being. So now let's, for the final part of this very nice and interesting talk, go to the homepage. Could you do some sort of walk us through your homepage?
Sure. This is the homepage for my School of Magic. I have a place where if you want to come and get a comprehensive education in magical studies, all the way from casting spells to doing alchemy to learning Kabbalah and more, come and hang out. This is all the free stuff that you can find because I do believe magic is for everyone. So I have a blog and a podcast, which is going to come back on live soon, some videos, some great challenges for email, a book club that meets once a week. I do rituals for the witchy holidays that are open to everyone. You can come find more about me. I have a live Q&A every week that everyone is allowed to come to if you want to ask any questions about magic.
Where is that? Is that here? Oh, this is.
Yep,
Okay.
in the middle.
Okay, good.
I have various membership programs. So if you just want to experience if you want to experience the shamanic side of astrology, I have the Society for Hour Keepers. We have rituals practically every week. I have a coven, which has over 150 hours of trainings for one low monthly price. And I have a mastermind. If you want to remake your whole life, come set up your own business, whatever you want to do. We meet once a week in small groups to give each other mutual support on getting those things started. I do have some private coaching.
How much do you charge for private coaching?
Depending on whether you're in my membership list or not, for my members, it's I think it's $375. For non-members, it's $500.
How long is it? 90 minutes?
Yeah, ish. I mean, plus any follow-ups that you want.
Okay, good.
I have some basic classes, some introductory classes for my Book of Shadows, doing all things moon. I just did a dream spell course not long ago.
Okay, and here's a newsletter, I suppose?
Yes, I have whenever I send it. I have longer 12, 16-week courses on tarot, Kabbalah, Planetary Magic 1 and 2.
Okay.
Planetary Magic 1 is connecting directly to the archetypes of the planets and how you can use them for the beginnings of remediation. Planetary Magic 2 is really the basics of what an astrology chart is and how to use it from the perspective of horary astrology and electional astrology.
Okay. So how many pupils do you have? How many students do you have?
Depends on how you define that. I have about 6,000 people on my mailing list. My
Okay.
largest astrology class had 800 people in it. So I would guess I probably have 1,500 altogether.
At the moment, these are all online courses, right?
Yes. Yeah, I don't teach in person
Okay.
since the pandemic. That doesn't mean that I won't someday. Um,
But when you look at your online services, at the moment, how many people are studying in your courses right now, freshly enrolled? Let's put it this way.
well, when they enroll, they don't like unenroll. So,
Oh,
um,
oh, so you don't you have a continuum with no ending, basically.
well, I mean, once you buy a course like Kabbalah, you own it. So you can come to any of the question and answer periods whenever you want.
Okay.
Um, you know,
Do you have live sessions where you are live
yeah.
present and they chat with you?
Yes, every week I have a Q&A on Wednesdays,
Okay.
and I do at least a ceremony a week um, for the new moons, the full moons, the sun ingress into a new zodiac sign,
And
and the witch.
that's for members only, or somebody who has bought at least one course. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
those are for members only, but we have 2 hours a week. You know, the Q&A and the book club, you don't have to have bought anything. You can just
Okay.
come and hang out.
Okay. Okay. So let's get rid of the computer. So did I miss to ask you an important question?
I don't think so.
Nothing to add?
I think I have the best job in the world, so it's all
Okay.
good.
So I personally and the viewers thank Donna Woodwell for taking her time to do this today. Thanks to
You're more than welcome.
Indianapolis. Okay, and I stop the recording.